Welcome to the Better Workday Podcast, hosted by Niamh Moynihan. Each week, Niamh shares tips, tricks, and insights to help you have a better workday. The ever-growing to-do list, shorter turnaround times, conflicting priorities, lack of resources, sometimes it can all feel like it's too much and something has to give. Niamh, how can I tell if I'm on course for a burnout, and is there a way to avoid it?
Hello. Welcome back to the Better Workday Podcast. And today I'm talking about burnout. This is a tricky subject for me to talk about. And it's because, to be quite honest with you, I don't know how many times I burnt out. And I was having this conversation with somebody the other day that I don't think we recognize burnout until we've been through it a few times. And then when it comes up again, it's like greeting an old friend saying, "Oh, hey, you, here you are again. I recognize you." So for a long time, I would have said that I burnt out 3 times in my career. But the more I become aware of my work and I learn more about this area, I think it's far more than that. In fact, based on what I know now, I burnt out for the first time at 17 when I was working part-time in River Island. Yeah, selling clothes. And I walked into work one day and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I quit. And isn't that funny that quite often we don't recognize things while we're in the situation, and it's only until months, if not years later, that we can look back and identify it for what it was. But today I do want to talk about some of the signs of burnout, or some of the traits, or some of the things that you might see, so that if you are struggling at work at the moment, that maybe it can be a signal for you maybe to take a closer look. So these are my experiences of burnout. There are lots and lots of different symptoms, but these are mine, and they're the ones that are most prevalent or most obvious for me every time I go close to that burnout trap. First, before we get down to that, I know a lot of people say that, I've never burnt out, I just get really tired. And I know that the World Health Organization has a black and white definition of burnout. But for the purpose of this podcast, I want you to think of, yes, burnout is the extreme, it's the worst case, but also exhaustion, and just feeling constantly tired, or that you're not able to do your best to work. You might not feel like you're completely burnt out, but being exhausted is also not okay. Okay, so if burnout is too strong a word for you, I want you to replace that with feeling exhausted. Okay, so here are some of the signs for me that I need to stop, take a breath, take a break, and reset. The first is I start working a lot of hours. So this might seem counterintuitive, but one of the signs of burnout is that you feel like you have to keep on working. And it's almost like, because you have the fear that if you stop working, that you won't want to start again. So if I ever get into a situation where my working hours are starting to creep up, but I'm not producing anything of value, then that's a sign. So I can get caught up checking emails for no reason, or, updating. I love a spreadsheet. So reformatting loads of spreadsheets, or just kind of almost getting like a hamster on a wheel and working, just because I'm afraid I can't get off the wheel. That is usually a sign that burnout is not far away. And while I'm doing that, I often found that I get very, very tired. As I said, I get exhausted, but also I lose my sense of humor. And this is one of the signs of burnout. I get very cynical. I'm no fun because obviously there is no joy because I'm very, very burnt out. But I get cynical about what other people say. I don't get the jokes. I don't make the jokes. I laugh considerably less. For me, I love music. I have a background in music, and I find that I play less music. So I listen to more books, or I listen to more podcasts, or I listen to more talk radio shows, and there'll be no music around, no lightness. And I'm always too busy for a game or too busy to relax. And that really just fuels that sense of exhaustion and fuels that journey towards burnout. And even from the work, because I love work, as some of you might know now at this stage, I find great joy in work. I always have for my whole life. But on those occasions where I'm at the burnout level, even the work I love feels like drudgery. It just feels like it's too heavy for me to lift. And I wonder, is it even worth it? Like, would anyone even notice if I didn't do it? And also, to be honest with you, I get a lot of physical manifestations of burnout. So some people might get migraines, you might get backache, you might get muscle tension. For me, I get IBS. So my stomach tells me when I am doing too much. The last one for me, just in terms of warning signs, is isolation. So whenever I start cancelling on my friends or cancelling on my family, I know that there's something up. But even cancelling work things. So in my case, cancelling a catch-up call with a peer or cancelling a call with a potential new client, and I just want to spend more and more time in my own head because I'm finding it too hard, I suppose, to handle everything. That is tricky. And that is a sign that I am burning out. And these are the kind of warning signals that you might say, yeah, Niamh, like I have a few of those, but I'm just having a bad week. And I'm like, but that's okay. But if you're having a bad week, week after week after week after week, well, then that's a sign. And one of the only ways that you can really chart that is to maybe keep a journal or keep a log or even just keep a little note at the end of your notebook, wherever you keep your notes at work, in terms of how you're feeling and any symptoms that you might be expressing. And quite often it'll be people other than yourself that will notice first. I'm calling these things out as if they're very black and white, and I'm conscious that I'm just talking about them as if they're an everyday thing. But I suppose for me, a lot of them are everyday occurrences in the fact that I would have experienced them so many times throughout my career. Like, of all of them, I think the biggest warning sign for me is that feeling of isolation, that, I'm doing all the work, I'm doing it on my own, I'm shouldering everything myself, and there's no one there to help me, even though I've always been, and I'm lucky to always have been, surrounded by great people to get help. And that now is the one that if it crops up at all, I stop and I say, okay, there's something going on here. If I start pushing people away, it's a sign. Now, in terms of burnout, a lot of people say or ask me, is that just something that's going to happen more and more often now that work is busier and, the work environment is so fast paced and there's always 101 things to do? And I would say, look, certainly I'm sure that the risk of burnout is higher. I mean, I feel it myself, but there's always some things that we can do. I always say there's always something that you can do. So the first is to start recognizing those early signs. So you might find that the ones I've said here resonate with you, or there might be other ones that are more relevant to yourself. But having that ability to take a few notes at the end of the day, or to take a journal out and write down how you're feeling and what's going on, is a great way to catch yourself before you go too far. Or honestly, just to have a buddy who can turn around to you and say, look, you seem a bit tired, you seem a bit stressed. Are you all right? I remember when I was working in a software company, I had somebody who didn't work in my team at all. They just worked close by to me, and they turned around to me one day and said, Niamh, are you all right? You seem very tired lately. You seem stressed. Is everything okay? And at that point in time, I said, oh yeah, everything's fine, just busy. But I remember driving home that evening going, God, maybe they're right. If they noticed it, perhaps there is something going on. And it was a help for me. So, sometimes the self-awareness isn't enough, and you do need other people to look out for you as well. And you need to look out for others as well, right? So no one is perfect and no one's got it all covered. So if you see somebody who might be struggling, if you feel you can say to them, I always would say to them. Now, the second thing that you can do is to have your boundaries. And boundaries are something which I suppose some people can get their backs up or their boundaries up about, and others fully embrace. And I think it's very much a personal thing. I have 4 types of boundaries because I suppose I want to create boundaries that work for me. And when I talk about boundaries now, mine aren't boundaries between me and other people or boundaries of my relationships. I'm talking about boundaries of my work, because for me, work is the biggest source of burnout. There have been other sources, but work is the big one. So the 4 boundaries I have are time, location, device, and situation. So in terms of time, it means being very, very, very honest with the number of hours that you're going to work in any given week, so that even if you are going to work more hours than you usually do, or more than the regular number of hours, that you can own it and that you can put self-care practices in place to support you doing it. So for example, if for some reason you're working a 60-hour week, I can't magic away those extra 20 hours, but what I can ask you to do is know it and then see what things you can do to mind yourself during the week, both before, during and afterwards, to make sure that you're looking after yourself. The second one is location. So, okay, here we say it. I've said this at many of my talks. I say to people all the time, there is no need to check your email on the toilet. There are just some places that work shouldn't go. I would argue there's some places that phones shouldn't go, but just to have some bit of space in your home and even in your office where work doesn't go. So the kitchen, the canteen, the bedroom, the bathroom, the back garden, perhaps, right? And even if work goes into other places, it doesn't go everywhere. After that, then I have devices. So as a business owner, I can have work on all of my devices, which is, tablets, computer, laptop, phones, all the things. And I found it very helpful to have at least one device which has no work on it. And if you have the ability to have your work email on your personal devices, I'd recommend you doing an audit of that and making sure that you're giving yourself space. We already spend a huge amount of time in front of screens, and any reminder of work, even when you're not at work, could be enough to draw you back into it. And then the final one, which is my favorite, which is situations. So this is where I pick 3 situations where I won't check work email. And full disclosure, I still struggle with these. So these are the things I aspire to do and I try my best to do. I don't always manage to do them, but that's why they're a work in progress boundary. So my situations are: I don't check work email in the queue when I'm doing shopping, any kind of shopping. I don't check my work email when I'm with my mom, or I try my best not to. That's usually the one that falls down, which is terrible. And I don't check my work email when I'm with my friends. And it's having a little boundary like that even if work seems to be a big part of the week, there is still space carved out for the other things, and it's not after sneaking in everywhere. And then, the final thing that you can do in terms of trying to prevent burnout is to rest, is to take breaks. I always say, if you think you're good without taking breaks, imagine how good you'll be if you do take your breaks. But the research has shown that taking a break before busy periods is even more beneficial than taking a break to recover from a busy period. So I have found that, in the past, I would book holidays or book days off when I got tired. And now I proactively plan days off and holidays, even if I'm not sure what's coming up or if I'm going to be busy, and they go in there as a non-negotiable. And this even comes down to my lunch break, long weekends, and all these kind of things. And on the mindfulness side of it, I know that not everybody is into meditation and mindfulness. I actually find it very hard. But for me, what I do, quite honestly, is I love a bit of ironing. Or I'll fold a load of clothes, I'll match odd socks. I think that's great, like for just chilling out the mind. Or I'll go for a run. So it doesn't have to be, sitting in a quiet, darkened room meditating. It could just be any exercise at all that brings you back to you and gives you a chance just to distill your thoughts and find yourself where you're at right now. The final thing I'd say on burnout is that I think a lot of people will experience it. I wouldn't say everybody's going to experience it, but I think a lot of people will experience it in their professional career. And if it does happen to you, don't beat yourself up about it, because, as I said, there's a lot going on at work these days, and there's a lot of expectations outside of work as well. What you don't want to do, though, is to fall into what I call the burnout cycle, which is to set unrealistic expectations, then overwork to achieve them, then to burn out as a result because you've stopped working for a moment, and then when you recover, to go set more unrealistic expectations again. So really, managing those expectations is absolutely key. And if you do experience burnout, know that it's more than just scheduling your break that's going to prevent the next one. It is going to be around making sure that you have that self-awareness, you have those boundaries, and you take your breaks and you stay connected with other people. It's such a huge, huge part of it. Look, if you need any support in this particular area, if you've any questions or comments, please do reach out to me. I only really touched the surface today, but I hope it's enough for you to start a conversation if it's a conversation that you need to have. Okay, folks, until next week, stay well and have a better workday.
Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. The Better Workday podcast is about helping you have a better workday, so we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. You can find our social media details as well as any references from this episode in the show notes.